I want to chat a bit about your church, because sometimes as a pastor, I feel like, is anything I'm talking about making any difference? You know, or like
Mhm.
you do campaigns, you think about sermon series, like you do pastoral counseling, and and you wonder, like, is this making a dent? And so I just want to chat, like, this is a church that you're at in St. Catharines, and they're having conversation around justice. It sounds like they're partnering with compassion. And that was a real backdrop. Like the Spirit was obviously doing something in your heart. And then there's this
Yeah.
church as a backdrop. Just tell me a little bit more about what was happening in that season in the life of your local church and how that was affecting you and your husband.
Yeah. So over 15 years ago, my husband and I were part of a pretty small, fairly affluent Mennonite church in a rural part of St. Catharines, Ontario. It's called a Fairview Louth Mennonite Brethren Church. And at the time, our church leaders started reading a book called The Church of Irresistible Influence. Have you heard of that book before, Jason?
No. Who's that by?
Okay. Robert Lewis, I believe. And one of the questions that Lewis asks in the book is, if your church were to close their doors tomorrow, would anyone even notice? And what we recognize as a faith community is that the answer was no. And the more that we reflected on that, the more that we recognized that that was incongruent with Scripture and what it means to be the church. And in addition to that, our pastors started asking us and really leading us around, what does it look like to live on mission, as I said, and to live our faith in action? And so, a long story short, in time, not dissimilar to my own family's journey, many years later, but we ended up selling our building in this rural area that was set apart from the downtown core and moving into the neighborhood. And we bought this old school building in the downtown core and started engaging in conversations with the mayor and local community
Wow.
leaders and social experts. Yeah. And asking the question, what is God already doing here? And how can we be a part of it? And what ended up happening is, the DNA of our church changed over time. And what we did first is we partnered with our local community and opened up a homeless shelter in our church. And this was a place of refuge for those who were experiencing crisis and homelessness. And it ended up being a 24/7, 365-day-a-week homeless shelter. But in time, what it ended up being for us was the opportunity to do life together with those who were different than us in so many ways, but to be in proximity, to learn from one another in a way that we became to realize that friendship really does make the difference in their life and in ours. But that was just the first step of what ended up being a series of decisions and choices
Wow.
that we made.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. And those are scary decisions for a church to make. You
Oh,
tell the
most
story in 2 minutes, but when you're living that real time, those are like board meetings and like, are we going to sell this thing? And are we going to give up like this comfortable thing we had, these rhythms we had, take on a project like a 24/7 shelter? It's radical.
Yeah, it really is. And so many unknowns, right? As far as,
Mm-hmm.
as you said, the operational side and the finances, but, the journey of helping us as a church that the pastors led us through in really understanding that this is not, and this was core, I'm reminded right now, that it wasn't about a program. It wasn't about just tack on an extra thing that we're going to do as a church, but it was reshaping our understanding of what it means to be a Jesus-centered community that then, breaks down this understanding, of divide between us and them, but also, this divide between what happens on a Sunday morning and real life outside of that. We said, no, this is all about being the church in our daily lives so we can support, when we say 24/7, 365 homeless shelter, this means that we're walking with them far beyond, what just happens on a Sunday morning. But, Jason, in time, what was so exciting is we began to, as we grew as a church, and, earlier you and I were talking about, the opportunity for the church to reimagine what it means, and the opportunity, I would say, for it to grow by having new entry points to the church. You know, right? Entry points for those you're connecting to and reaching to that may not ever have engaged with the church before, but also entry points for those who may have grown up in a faith background, but are able to reconnect because they're more interested in loving and serving their neighbors, you know, that we were able to provide. So that happened. Our church grew, and in time we became a multi-site church, and we opened up, you know, 2 other branches of the church, not to kind of go there and create a presence in the area, but because we had people who were from those regions coming to us, we said, no, just stay connected in your local community. What's God doing there, and how can you be a part of it?